Hello dear learners, I hope all of you are doing well. Let me continue the discussion on the situational or contingencies theories of leadership. In the previous session, we have talked about two important theories, Fiedler's LPC theory of leadership and I discussed about the path goal theory of leadership. In this session, we are going to continue the discussion on the situational leadership theories. Let me first of all talk about the situational leadership theory, which is also referred to as life cycle theory of leadership. Now, according to this theory, the leadership style has to be flexible, meaning that the theory suggests that the style of the leader should fit the followers' readiness. Let me first of all tell you what is the meaning of followers' readiness. Followers' readiness has been described in terms of the combination of the people's ability to do the work and their willingness to do the work, right? So, one is related to ability, another is related to the attitude of the people to do the work, right? Now, it says that ability of the people can be either low or high. At the same time, willingness also can be low to high. Now, let us see how with the followers readiness, in terms of their ability to high to low and willingness low to high, what kind of leadership style will be much more appropriate in different kind of situations. When the followers ability is low and their willingness is also low, the style which is prescribed in the theory is telling style, directing the activities of the followers. You have to tell them, you have to focus on tough procedures, rules and regulations, and then ask them to work according to the goals and to work towards the goal accomplishment by following the telling style, right? On the other hand, if the ability of followers is low, they do not know their work task and of course their willingness, but their willingness to do work is high. In that case, this style which is is mentioned in the theory is selling style. You have to focus on how you can tell them to increase their ability, focusing on because these people are willing, they want to exert effort, but you have to then convince them in terms of focusing on high task relationship there, right? And once we have ability high but the willingness is low, the leadership style which is going to be more important is participating style of leadership, because these people have low willingness but these people know how to do work. So, in that case you have to involve these people in the activities in case of decision making, in terms of their inputs to various processes. So, then they can actually channelize their efforts toward working on the goal accomplishment, right? Finally, if we have ability followers who have high ability as well as their willingness is high, the style which should be followed by the leader should be delegating style. Just allot the work, delegate the work to these people, they will work on the goal accomplishment. In that case, you need not to intervene, control these people, because they will let the things work and focus on the goal accomplishment, right? So, the idea of the theory here is that depending upon the followers' ability and willingness and combination of this in terms of followers' readiness, the leaders have to be flexible in terms of changing their style or fit their style to meet the requirements of the followers depending upon what they would want from you, and then make the situation much more effective in terms of the work outcomes, right? Then dyadic leadership theory, leader-member exchange. Please follow the reference here by Griffin and Moorhead to know more about this theory. So, this particular theory, the focus of this theory is on the development of vertical relationship between a follower and a leader. So, there are a lot of followers who will be working under the guidance of the leader. There are a lot of followers who are having different kind of abilities, different kind of competence to work in. So, leaders, they form the vertical relationship with the people. So, if the relationship are high exchange relationships, right? High exchange means that there is a mutual trust between the followers and the leader. there is high level of commitment among the followers in terms of supporting the leader in terms of work outcomes, and they also receive lot of support from the leaders. Benefits also will be great, but of course they will get much more work. On the other hand, if we have the other group of people who are working under the leader, it doesn't have the low high exchange relationship, they have low exchange relationship. So in that phase, commitment of the people would not be that high. So they will also not be receiving the benefits from the leader. So the theory have it's much more implication in terms of how the relationships are being formed between the leaders and the followers in terms of high quality exchange relationship for the work outcomes in the organization, right? Now with this we are going to talk about the model of transactional and transformational leadership, components of transactional and transformational leadership, as per the proposed by Avelio and Ribas in the text titled Developing Potential Across the Full Range of Leadership. We'll look into various styles of leadership as prescribed by the authors. So first of all, the transactional leadership style. Three broad categories of leadership styles they have discussed. One is laissez-faire style. So what are the characteristics of the laissez-faire style? Basically what happens is largely it says that it's more we can say avoidance. There is avoidance of leadership, or we can also say absence of leadership. Also considered to be inactive form of leadership, right? Laissez-faire is an inactive form of leadership, and there is nothing transacted. Nothing transacted means there is no initiation from the leader side that if you do work outcomes then there will be something reward or things like that. So there is no transaction because absence of leadership, and this is the least effective style of leadership, right? Then comes the management by exception. It can be both passive and active. Management by exception can be both passive or active style of leadership. So when we talk about active leader, the active leader in terms of management by exception, what he'll do is he actively monitor the activities and see if there are any kind of deviances from the standards, if there are any kind of errors in the work which is being done by the followers, and of course also taking the corrective actions timely, right? These are some of the characteristics of the transactional leader. Then comes the contingent reward, which the author says that it is reasonably effective style of leadership. What happens is in this case the leaders is assigning the work to the followers, right? And of course the followers also are in agreement with the kind of work which is being allotted to this. In this case what happens is there is also the performance is contingent upon the this reward, saying meaning that the leaders promises that rewards are to be given when there is a successful completion of the work which is allotted to them, right? So that's why we're talking about transactional. There is a transaction involved, in terms of the work outcome there are rewards which are to be provided to the followers, right? So these are the components of the transactional leadership which are mentioned in the text of Avolio and Bass, right? What is the author talked about in terms of change, process of change, and say if you want to bring some kind of transformational changes in the organization with respect to structure, processes, and it's more of a visionary style of leadership. The author talks about transformational leadership style having these important characteristics, right? Idealized influence, inspirational motivation, individualized consideration, and intellectual stimulation. So I will talk about some of the behaviors under these components of transformational leadership style that the leaders follow in order to influence people in the organization. Let's first of all talk about idealized influence, right? Now what happened in this case, as the name indicate, idealized influence, the leaders in the organization, they come across as the role models for the followers, right? They demonstrate the values of the organization. They have high level of integrity, right? Their credibility is high. So ultimately what happen is these people will come across the role models for the followers, and they are very, very consistent in their behavior, right? They are very consistent, and also there is a share, they share risk with the followers. they avoid making use of their power for personal gains, because the idealized influence is there. They will have to come across as people who are credible people, they are consistent in their behavior, and they are ideal, the role models for the people, right? There is they are known for following the higher ethical standards, moral conduct. These are the some of the characteristics of the component of idealized influence, and you will see these kind of behaviors very much in the people who are transformational leaders, right? Inspirational motivation, as the name indicates, it's to do with lot of enthusiasm, right? Enthusiasm, if you look at, also optimism. Optimism is one dimension we have talked about in positive organizational behavior. So what happened is, these people, they will give the people the work which is much more meaningful and challenging for work, right? So ultimately they kind of give work to the people which is more challenging and more meaningful for people, right? There is also a clear-cut expectations in terms of the work outcomes, right? And also they demonstrate a clear commitment to goals, and also share vision. So these are some of the characteristics of the inspirational motivation. There is also work on the teamwork, focus on teamwork, team spirit with enthusiasm and optimisms and things like that, right? Then comes the intellectual stimulation. In case of intellectual stimulation, you see that these leaders will, how they will behave whenever some kind of work is being done. They will always have questions, because question, if you ask, no, it will lead to the more improvement. They will always ask, questions, assumptions, right? They will always encourage their followers to find out innovative and creative ways to do things. Creativity is always encouraged, right? They also, encourage their, the followers to experiment with the ideas, and also no criticism, no blame, even if their ideas are different from, the ideas of the leaders. That's what is the, the idea of intellectual stimulation. If you really want followers to do really well, you have to exhibit these kind of behaviors to set the environment of support, so that people, they excel, in the work, right? Then comes the individualized consideration. As the component itself talked about the individual, here consideration. So basically the leaders always focus on the needs, for achievement of the leaders. They actually coaches and mentor the followers. They also help in creating opportunities for the followers to grow in the organization. Also, supportive environment. There are always interactions, personal interactions between the followers and the leaders. Leaders listen to the followers really effectively, right? So these are some of the transformational leadership styles behavior which the authors have talked about, right? Now let us now move quickly towards something which is much more prevalent in the public sector leadership. So here I am referring to the work of Fernandez, Cho and Perry in the article entitled "Exploring the Link Between Integrated Leadership and Public Sector Performance." And the article is published in Leadership Quarterly, right? Now, the according to the authors, in the case of public sector, they focus on 5 leadership roles which are essential for success of leaders in public sector. So largely they have worked in the public sector, and they have talked about what are the most important roles, leadership roles which are essential for the success of leaders in the public sector. So let us look into the integrated leadership roles that they have talked about in the paper. One is task orientation, task oriented leadership, relations oriented leadership, change oriented leadership, diversity oriented leadership, and the integrity oriented leadership. In the beginning, when I was introducing you to the evolution of the leadership research, I talked about this thing, that task and the relationship orientation already been listed in or discussed under the behavioral approaches. Change oriented and the other diversity oriented, integrity oriented leadership, this what has also been given as a part of this particular paper. Let us look at what are the behaviors as per the authors which are listed under when somebody is task oriented, where is the focus? If somebody is change oriented, where is the focus? Let us look into little more detail about this. Now, as per authors, when somebody is task oriented leader, these different kind of roles when they play, what they do is very in terms of setting the goals. Goal setting is much more important, and performance standards are very important, right? For these people, setting goals and performance standards are very important. They focus on communication. Clear communication has to be there. They also provide feedback to the followers, right? One of the most important thing that they do is ensuring compliance with the procedures. Compliance with the procedures is very, very important as per the role of task oriented leadership, and also they are directing and coordinating the activities of the subordinates. So these are some of the behaviors which are mentioned under the task oriented leadership as far as integrated leadership in public sector organization is concerned, right? Then is the second role, which is relations oriented leadership. In here, the focus of the leader is on welfare of the subordinates. They show concern and they show welfare towards the followers, and also they have that kind of inclination to have good relationship with the followers there. Also they treat their followers equally. They are fair about this thing. Showing also well-being is important for these people. Well-being of the followers is very important as far as relationship oriented role is concerned. Whenever the followers, they do good work, there is always appreciation and recognition of the work, right? And also providing opportunities to people to grow, right? Growth opportunities are being provided as far as relations orientation is concerned, right? We're talking about public sector organizations, and we're talking about integrated leadership roles. Another important thing is change oriented, very important. When we discuss about the case of the, we will discuss about the case of transformational, in the school education in the Andhra Pradesh, we'll talk about this change orientation, very important in terms of both in private and public sector organization, but more to do with, the public sector context. We'll talk about when we talk about, the case there. Now, when somebody is change oriented, so what is the focus of change? Vision, where they want to take this organization from one state to another. They will always continue to identify opportunities or the avenues to make change, or taking initiatives which will take this organization from one level to the another. Not only this thing, they are also closely monitoring the activities which are happening in the environment, and they focus on adapting and of course being flexible in terms of responding to the changes happening outside, right? And because it is change orientation, lot of focus is on innovation and creativity. These people always encourage their employees to look for the creative ways to solve problems, look for the innovative ways to solve problems, and look for the different ways of doing in the organization. Then is the diversity oriented leadership. It's more to do with the leaders which have a lot of appreciation and understanding of the concept of diversity, right? The idea here is that when there is a diversity and there are different people coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, right? So when they contribute to the decision making, they participate in the activities of the organization, what happens is the outcomes are going to be good outcomes, right? That is where the focus of this thing. So it can lead to better quality decisions, it can lead to better alternatives to look into the certain situations, or perhaps solve the problems, or leveraging the opportunity. So there are a lot of things which the diversity can do. Diverse workforces can lead the organization in a different way, because the ideas they come up with, the alternative views they come up with are going to lead to better decision making, right? Integrated oriented leadership, more to do with public sector organization, is basically focus on, we have been talking about this thing as a public organization character, to take care of the aspect of equity, there is fairness, right? That's what we are talking about in terms of, and of course ensuring aspects of legality. So when somebody is integrated oriented leadership role they are playing, their focus is on, taking care of equity related issues, fairness related issues and the legality of the issues. Now we will look into the case study of transforming school education in Andhra Pradesh. And this case I have taken from a book titled No More a Civil Servant, authored by Mr. Anil Swaroop, published in 2022 by Unique Publisher. The author's permissions have been taken for the use of this case in this particular session. Let's look into this case and try to find out what kind of change-oriented behavior has been used by the leader to bring in transformation to the school education in the Andhra Pradesh. Let's look into the background first of all. The case begins with the discussion on the several challenges confronting school education in Andhra Pradesh. An author narrates that the delivery of public education in the state was highly fragmented. There was frequent changes in the leadership, low levels of the learning outcomes among the students. These are the problems which school education in the Andhra Pradesh was confronting. Reduced reduction in the funding, which led to inconsistent and poor focus on quality, because when funds are not there, somewhere it has to be trade-off, some kind of trade-offs are to be made in terms of what is prioritized over the other. So it led to the inconsistency and poor focus on the quality. Poor student strength in the government schools, inadequately regulated English medium private schools, right? Not very proper, the investigation and regulation being done. Most of the school get, inadequately regulated. Lack of transparent and accountable administrative systems, increase in the number of poor quality teacher training institutes, right? The colleges and the institutions which are to give the good quality teaching, their number increased like anything. There's a mushrooming of these institutions without focus on quality teacher training. This was the problem that the education system in the Andhra Pradesh was confronting. Then there was a leadership change. It came with the appointment of Ms. K. Sandhya Rani, the former Indian Postal Service officer, appointed as Commissioner, School of Education, Andhra Pradesh in 2015. Now, focus of her leadership was on improvement in student learning outcomes, professional development of the teacher, consolidated government schools. We'll talk about how everything has been done under her leadership and how it is also demonstrating the change-oriented behaviors of the leader. Then the focus was also on improving governance, transparent and accountable administrative systems, and leveraging technology wherever is possible to bring in the changes required to set the standards of the education of school education in Andhra Pradesh. Now, various consultations with the stakeholders were undertaken. An EdTech policy and the action plans were developed and implemented with a focus on technology to improve student engagement in learning processes, knowledge and skills building to support teachers, improve governance through transparent and accountable systems. Now you see that when we talk about the change-oriented behaviors in the, under integrated leadership in public sector, we talk about these leaders, they identify most promising strategic initiatives. They encourage employees to look for creative solutions. They become adaptive and responsive to change in the external environment. Now, this particular case study is a classic example of how leaders change oriented behavior, and the vision that is being set for uplifting the standard of the school education in Andhra Pradesh is clearly visible in the actions which are taken by Ms. Sandhya Rani. Focus on technology to improve student engagement in learning process, knowledge and skills building to support teachers and improve the governance. Now, what were the initiatives which were taken under her leadership? First among these, data management and technology. Implementation of School Information Management System SIMS to map Aadhaar seeded database of teachers and students. Now, what happened is multiple enrollments in both in government and private schools were there. So number has increased, multifold, right? number of students were less, but because of the this multiple entries into the government schools and the private schools, the number has gone up, and it also has impact on the budget of the education of the government, right? Now, after the implementation of this system, what happened when Aadhaar seeded database was used for teachers and students? Ultimately, duplicacy was removed. It was identified multiple cases where the students were enrolled for both government and private school, which has increased the burden on the government in terms of the budget, because the excess of resources to be given, right? So it helped the school education department to take care of this issue with the help of technology to reduce the budget and make use of that budget to the effective other priority areas. Access to digital content through digital classrooms was introduced, virtual classrooms and QR code textbooks to learn for learning. So technology also helped the students to engage them in the learning. Development of a portal, Andhra Pradesh e-knowledge exchange for professional development of teachers through technology integrated pedagogy. So you see that how the goal and strategy of leveraging technology has been used by taking the key initiative by under her leadership. Digital classrooms were set up in various government schools to uplift the standard of teaching and learning in the schools. Then, with respect to governance and accountability, e-hazard attendance systems for teachers was introduced to better track and monitor the activities. Performance-based teacher transfer and recruitment tests were undertaken. Online systems to track private school for registration and school rationalization and consolidations. The schools where the number of enrollments were less, they have been consolidated with the other nearby schools to better make the effective use of the resources and efficient use of the resources to make the entire system work according to the goals which were being set. Then innovation and partnerships. Collaborations with non-government organizations for improvement of students and teachers. Partnership with Tata Trust. Development of school education transformation framework termed Badi Parivartan. So they have actually formed a collaboration with Tata Trust. For the collaborations, we will have another module which will talk in weeks to come on public management through collaboration. So partnership also help to bring in the change processes in the public organizations, to make use of the organization in the network, to make use of the resources for the betterment of the society. So this Badi Parivartana framework was introduced. Introduction of the happiness curriculum that was termed Anand Vedika led to the generation of interest among school students and teachers. So it has been seen that with this, the the enrollment and the presence, it increased in number of teachers and number of students in the school, because they were excited to go to school because of the curriculum being introduced and the kind of activities which are being taken under this particular initiatives. Now, what is the impact of these changes and recognition? In terms of student performance, it has improved and it has been witnessed in the National Assessment Survey. Andhra Pradesh ranking improved to 3rd place at primary level, 5th place in upper primary and 2nd place in class 10th performance. I will suggest learners to go to the book. It's a very interesting book, and not only this particular case, various other cases have been discussed in the public sector as far as change, leadership, motivation, rules and regulations are concerned. It is a good read for the learners in the course like public organizations and management. Another important impact was increased enrollment and trust. Student enrollment increased to over 2.30 lakhs from private to government schools during 2018 to 20 because of the improvement in the quality standards. Effective school governance through the introduction of transparent and accountable administrative processes, effective teacher management and fewer legal disputes, because now the recruitments and the transfers were based on more performance oriented and technology has been leveraged throughout, so there were fewer legal disputes. Awards and recognition. This particular project SIMS, which I introduced under the data management initiative, this project received the South Asian Manthan Award. The Commissionerate received the Impact Catalyst 2019 Award for the systematic education reform. Now you see that the role played by the leader and the change initiatives and the change oriented behaviors demonstrated by the leader has how impacted the functioning of the schools and transformed the entire school education in the state of Andhra Pradesh. It has not only brought in the changes, but also in terms of impacts and recognition, they have received several awards and the problems has been taken care of. If you want to learn more about the case, you can refer to the book which is cited on the slide here. It will be interesting to find out more about what kind of other changes were initiated and introduced in uplifting the standard of school education in the Andhra Pradesh. It was a good case of transformation school education in the state. Let us now look at what is the leadership in the administrative context, right? So there are certain definitions which are more apt in the context of public sector context, administrative context, which are given in the text of Van Watt in the text titled Leadership in Public Organization. Let us look at these three important way of defining leadership in the administrative context. So according to the authors, leadership is the process of providing results by authorized systems in effective, efficient and legal manner. So please note that these are the definitions which are more I will say contextualized to the administrative settings, or we can say a government setting. So focus is on providing results by authorized systems in an effective, efficient and legal manner. Then the key element of administrative leadership is this public service focus. The leadership focus in terms of administration is on public service, and we have talked about this also in terms of public service motivation when we were talking about it in the previous week, right? Now leadership is a composite of providing technical performance, internal direction to followers and external organizational direction, all with the public service orientation. Please see that the idea here is public interest. So in that context, the definitions are being proposed in the context of the the interest of the public service orientation. When the leaders, they pursue the decision making, they do activities, the focus is always on the public service, public interest and the welfare of the community at large, right? Okay, now we look into the roles of the public leaders. This is another interesting paper by Tummers and Nice published in 2016. Measuring public leadership, developing scales for 4 key public leadership roles. So not only they have defined these roles, but also they have developed the scale with which one can measure the leadership of the public organization, leadership in the public organization. So they have talked about 4 different roles in terms of public leadership. One is accountability leadership, rules following leadership, political loyalty leadership, network governance leadership. Now let us look into what they mean by all these. I'm going to talk about how they have defined these particular roles. What are the activities that they do when somebody is playing a role of accountability leader, rules following leader, or political leader, or network governance leader, right? So first of all, let's look into the accountability leadership. So according to the authors, in this particular role, what the leader they are doing is they ask their employee, or I will say they will there is encouragement of the followers to always whatever actions that they are followers are taking, the leaders are always asking them to justify and explain the action. That's what is the role of the accountability leadership. That because it's accountability, right? We talked about we are answerable to the government, answerable to the public, and of course various other stakeholders. So whenever the followers are taking some kind of decisions, there are activities being done. So ultimately they have to justify their actions because of the accountability. They are answerable to the stakeholder outside. So actions, justification and explanation to the stakeholder is the role of accountability leadership, right? Rules following leadership is focus is on following the rules and regulations of the government. Rules and regulation of the government, compliance focus, right? They always encourage their followers to act depending upon the rules and regulation. That also in a way control accountability and control mechanism if you look at, right? Political loyalty leadership is basically in this case what happened is they always encourage their followers to align the efforts with the political, the interest of the political authority. In this case, the leaders will encourage the employees to align their action with the political authority, interest of the political authority, right? That's what is the political loyalty. That's why we'll talk about political loyalty leadership. And they have also developed a scale to measure these different kind of leadership. So please refer to this paper. It's a very interesting paper, and also some of the researchers who are interested in public leadership can look into this area. It's worth exploring. Then is the network governance leadership. In this case, the focus of the leader is on encouragement of the followers in terms of building networks, right, with the stakeholders outside. Network, or we'll say partnering with the stakeholders outside, we'll say looking for the connection, active connection from the followers, from the network in that particular context, right? So these are the roles which are much more prevalent in the some of the roles which are much more I would say apt or suitable in terms of research and discussion in the public sector context. So people who are interested in this, they can always look into the various aspects, right?